Hiya Nines, we've got an awful lot to get through today, so I do need you to have a pen and paper or a book that you're going to start making notes. So as I'm going, you need to be making notes on it. Okay, so you need to stop it, go find something and get ready to do it. Okay, so wastage is something that we need to know the definition of. Now, wastage is the process of cutting away materials with tools and equipment. Okay, so it's taking things away. It's not sort of when we think about waste as in things that are, that we have to throw out because we don't need them anymore. It's talking about an actual piece of timber or plastic or metal or whatever, and you somehow removing part of it. Okay, so the first version, first thing you'd use are saws. Okay, and you've got, obviously we've got a tenon saw, cope and saw. You'll have used both of them so far, and they will cut pieces of material away from whatever it is you've got. Okay, now with the saws we need to look at what's called TPI. Okay, so if we look at this diagram here, you've got TPI, which means teeth per inch. We've talked about this several times in year 7 and 8, but I'm just going to quickly go through it again. So what you need to remember is the less teeth, so the less TPI, the rougher the cut. Okay, the more TPI, the more teeth that you have per inch, it tends to be smaller teeth then, you get a smoother cut, but it's just slower when you're cutting because it's not ripping through your material as much. Alright, now your different saws, again remember you have them for different reasons. Tenon saw, straight edges, it's got this brass panel at the top, or just a strengthening panel at the top, which stops this part from wobbling and moving when you're sawing. So it enhances it encourages you to cut straight lines. Okay, so if you're doing joints or anything like that, you'd use that. And the cope and saw, which we used in year 7 and in year 8 to cut, that was to cut curves, making sure that you could cut different directions quite easily. Okay, because it's got a teeny tiny blade, that means you can move it in different directions, and it'll cope going around everything. That's not what's called a cope and saw though, just for that. Now with the cope and saw as well, when you look at the teeth on it, it's important that the teeth are pointing towards the handle, because when you saw with it, you pull back to saw with it. Okay, the difference is with a tenon saw, you push forward to saw. So they're your saw. That's part of one part of wastage. Now I'm going to look at the next slide, which is very quickly and look at other parts of wastage as well. So again, other methods of wastage. Remember, removing bits from whatever it is you've got. Drilling, right? You're drilling a hole, or you're drilling small holes or big holes. You're taking things away, right? Chiseling. If you're using a chisel, you're removing shiving off small bits of timber at a time. Again, you are removing and taking away from that original piece of timber that you had. Sanding, you shape and smooth surfaces with a sander, and again, even if you're just smoothing it, you're still taking some of that away. If you had a piece of timber at the beginning and you weighed it, and then you weighed it after you'd finished, it would be much lighter because things have been removed. So wastage is removing part of it. Okay, I'll put some links up there. They probably won't work, but on here, but I'll put them into the links video fact sheet, and you can pick it up there if you want to have a look at it. Just different ways of using chisels, sanding and drilling. Okay, right, now we did this in year 7, so you should pretty much remember most of this, but I'm just going to quickly go through it again. Again, you need to be making notes. So when we're talking about materials now, we're going to talk about natural timbers today on this slide. And remember, a natural timber comes straight from the tree. It's not a manufactured board, it's not MDF or chipboard. It's a piece of timber that will have things like grain and knots in it. And they're put into 2 categories, softwood and hardwood. The easiest way to remember it is really, softwoods come from pointy trees. So if you think of things like Christmas trees, they're sort of that kind of shape, a coniferous tree. So, and they have needles, they don't have leaves. Okay, your hardwoods generally come from what we call broadleaf trees, which are your deciduous trees. They're the ones that lose their leaves in winter, and they are slower growing. Okay, so your hardwoods slower growing, softwoods are faster, and there are different benefits from that. Obviously softwood, because it grows faster, it's more sustainable, and it means you can have things made cheaper. Okay, hardwoods being taking longer to grow are more expensive, but you're going to get a different effect, possibly a nicer grain from it. It's going to be a higher quality product. Okay, so that's your differences. You need to remember that, and you need to make notes on that particular slide. Okay, so when we talk about timber, and we talk about what's called a conversion process, okay, and that's taking it from a tree and turning it into a workable piece of timber, a plank of wood, you know, a piece of wood that you can use. Okay, so when we talk about the conversion process, that's what we're talking about. So on this slide, you can see we've got 4 diagrams, different ways to cut wood. All right, so if you imagine that's a log, and we're cutting it in different ways. So the first one, we've got a bulk cut, and that is basically turning it into this shape here. So you can see here what you would cut off them bits around the edges, and you get a big piece of timber, a beam almost of timber. Okay, now that's quite a big piece of wood, so you might use that for beams and sort of, you know, fireplaces maybe, or something like that. And then you look at number 2, which is your through and through, and that's literally just cut from top to bottom all the way through. Okay, and you're using all of it. You're not cutting off the edges just to get to the middle. You're using all of it. Okay, and that is it's very simple, and it's cost effective because you're using virtually everything on there. Some pieces are going to, you know, not be very good for anything, but you are basically processing the whole lot of it. Okay, now if we look at number 3, the tangential cut, that is looks very complicated cut design, and what it does is it maximizes all of the grain and all of the patterns in the timber. So when it's cut and opened up, you get a very attractive pattern, and it shows off the grain. So that would be used for things like small jewellery boxes, for instance, things which are pretty. You know, you want to show that off, because you're not going to get very large pieces. As you can see, it's quite small bits, but it will be used as an attractive and sort of for aesthetic reasons. Okay, and your quarter cut, which is this one here. Now, excuse me while I go back. The quarter cut one is expensive for the reason you can see here. You're losing a lot of timber all the way around there, and you'll lose the same again all the way around here when you do that there. So that would be used for, you know, expensive pieces, and again you could use maybe for tables and wooden flooring and things like that, but it's quite expensive because you're losing a lot. All right, now I want you to draw that out, and I want you to write down those explanations, please. Okay, so we're now going to look at some hardwoods and their properties. All right, so again, we did this in year 7, but I'm just going to go through it again with you. So ash is your first one. So it's tough and flexible. When you look at the pictures next to it, you've got sporting equipment and you've got ladders. You need flexibility within the timber, otherwise if something hits it, it's going to snap. Okay, so when you're writing down your properties and your uses, you need to be looking at that and matching them up. Okay, second one, beech. Again, that has what's called a fine grain, so you don't get splinters. So when you look at it's made a children's toy, it's smooth, it's got a nice sort of finish to it. It's got poor hardness, which means it will dent and whatnot, but it doesn't really matter. You're looking at it for the smoothness and the fact that it's got a nice close grain, which means it will feel nice to hold. Okay, so mahogany is a very dark red colour. It's very expensive because it's slow growing, and for modern times we don't really use a lot of mahogany because it's not really fashionable anymore. As you can see, it's got that deep dark red finish to it. Oak, light brown. I mean, you know, Oak's very popular. It's used in construction because it's strong, but it's also used in for things like tables and doors because it's quite a pretty colour, nice light colour, and it's got some interest to it with grain and with knots. So again, two different uses for oak. Okay, so balsa wood, very lightweight, very soft. You can cut it with a craft knife. You don't need to use a saw on it. Used for model making, obviously, because of that lightweight property to it. It's still a hardwood though. Don't be mistaken by the fact that it's very soft in that respect. That's not what it means. Okay, so now moving on to soft woods. Okay, now your larch is something which is seen in all the gardens and garden sheds and fences. It's got a slightly reddish tinge to it, and its main property is it resists rot. It doesn't rot, so you don't have to worry too much about it being outside. You still have to preserve it and stain it and whatnot, but it will stay it won't rot as quickly as any other timber outside. Pine, very versatile, used quite a lot, really inexpensive because it is such a fast growing tree. It's not very strong, it's not very hard, but it's useful for outdoor furniture and things like doors. Spruce is a creamy white softwood. It's got small knots, so you don't get much waste from it because you don't have to worry about the knots getting in the way. It's good for musical instruments because it has good sound properties, but it can also be used for furniture, as you can see. And it's quite a pretty looking wood. It's quite light, and it's also lightweight. Okay, so manufactured boards, different from natural timber. They are made by humans and have a consistent quality that natural timber may not. That is what you need to remember about that. They come in two categories. We've got laminated boards and we've got compressed boards. Laminated boards are layers and veneers of wood which are glued together. Compressed is more particle, which will, again, you glue together, but it's got this kind of messy finish sometimes. So your plywood are thin layers, thin sheets here, and they are layered with the grain in alternate directions, so you get quite a strong finish. It's not all, the grain's not going all in the same way, so it makes it quite strong. And you can have thin plywood, you can have thicker layers, so you can make it different widths. Blockboard, slightly different. It has literally blocks of wood in the centre, and it's sandwiched together with a veneer of your choice, really, so that you can have a nice finish, but inside it's a mess of just blocks of wood. Okay, and you can make the sheets very thick. You can see it's almost like a wafer, and you can make very thick boards with it. Chipboard, again, that is chips. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It's chips of wood that's bonded together with a laminated surface. So you can put something nice and pretty on top, but you've got this which looks like a Weetabix in the middle. So it's really inexpensive, but it's not particularly strong. Okay, you'd have to put a laminated surface on to make it look nice. MDF, which you've used quite a lot of. That's very fine particles, almost looks like hair in some ways of wood, which are glued together in very thin layers, and again it can be quite thick, quite thin, and it's squashed together with glue to create a very uniform board. It's not particularly strong, but it's very easy to work with. You can cut it very easily, and it's inexpensive in the same way that most of your boards are. Okay, they just haven't got a particularly nice finish to them. So your natural timber fact is fill in the gaps. Again, go through it at your leisure, make sure you can have seen everything and make notes on everything, and then do these fact tests, please. Okay, and the manufactured board one is the same, so I would like you to complete them, but I do want you to do a actual sheet on all that I've gone through. I know I went through really quickly, but there was quite a lot to get through today. But go through it at your leisure and make sure that you are clear on what the difference between a hardwood and a softwood is, what wastage is, what a manufactured board is compared to natural timber, and I want to know at least one property and one use of each one. I'll put some more links up on there from Technology Student, which will help you with this as well. Okay, thank you very much. I will see you next week.